everyone. So we're here with the director and some of the cast of the Sundance film Living from Oliver Hermanus. And we have Bill Nighy and Amy Lou Wood. Really enjoyed watching the film, and I think a lot of other people will too. Oliver, this is kind of a reimagining of a Kiru set in London, post-war London. How did you come to this project, and what's the background and how it came together?
It was the journey into Living was very influenced by the premiere of my previous film Moffy in London, where I was introduced to the producers of Living, to Stephen Woolley, and we generally spoke about things, and he honed in on this particular project and mentioned that Kazuo Ishiguro had already written a draft of the screenplay, and they were looking for a director. And I came home and we kept talking about it. I was then sent that draft, and then I went back to London for other things, and it sort of evolved from there. I had to meet with Ishiguro and get sort of grilled by him. This project was really born out of people who love cinema and who love a particular period in cinema, wanting to make something that celebrated that period in cinema. I was lucky enough to get the job to do that. So
you were grilled by Ishiguro.
I mean, you know, they were looking for a director who appreciated not only Kurosawa and 50s Japanese cinema, but who appreciated British cinema of that time, Ealing Studios. But also, you know, what was so great about the start of this journey was that Ishiguro and Stephen Woolley, what they really wanted to do is they wanted to make a movie with Bill Nighy, and they wanted me to make that film with them.
And so, Bill, so you sounds like you were a very important part of the impetus of this project, as seen by the producers. And for you and Amy, what attracted each of you to the project, and how did you come to be involved?
I came to be involved because Stephen Woolley, our producer who I worked with before, invited me to dinner, and I forgot that I was supposed to go to dinner, and I fell asleep on the sofa. The phone rang. And Stephen said, you're nearby. I was nowhere nearby. I was like, you know, I'd completely forgotten. And I knew that the other guest was Kazuo Ishiguro, the internationally famous, you know, Nobel Prize winning novelist. So I thought I've really messed up. Anyway, I ran there, and after dinner, and they spend the evening throwing nerdish film facts at one another. About British, but largely about black and white British films between the 1930 and 1960. And at the end of the evening, Ishiguro and his wife Laura said, "We know what your next film should be." And I said, "Well, when you're ready, let me know." And then 2 weeks later, Stephen rang me and told me that this was the plan. So that's how it happened, yeah.
I was in lockdown and I got the self-tape through, and I obviously saw the team behind it and thought that'd be quite nice. And then I did a couple of self-tapes, and I was saying before, I just love the story. I love how much heart is in it. I also find my character Margaret super aspirational. I think she's like, I relate to her in a lot of ways, but I also find her ability to be present and to find the extraordinary in the ordinary and to really live just so beautiful. And I really enjoyed being her for the kind of 10-minute self-tapes, and I thought I would like more of that. And Bill, you know, I've just absolutely loved him forever. I saw all of his previous film and I thought that's like gone straight up into my top 5 films I've ever seen. So it was, you know, I was just, and obviously, yeah, just everyone involved is so brilliant.
One thing that really stuck out to me, Bill, is that you know, this is still someone who's a gentleman through and through. So when he kind of has this opening up and you know, realizing, you know, reconsidering his priorities in life in these last months that he has to live, you know, there's still some restraint. There's still, you know, he's not completely letting loose. What was your approach to kind of capturing that?
Yeah, it's a character that I was very interested in. I'm very interested in playing It's not often you get a long role, which is playing someone who's just simply straightforward and decent. In this case, I also approached him as someone who I figured was institutionalized in grief, and that when his wife died very early on, something was arrested in him. It's not difficult to be released from that kind of restraint. And I'm being cute, but it's true when you're acting with Amy Lou Wood, because there's nothing you can do. She's just irresistible, and and she did. It was like it was happening live as you see it. You know what I mean? She did really she is contagious, infectious, and enchanting. And the fact that, and the great thing, as someone who procrastinates personally at an Olympic level, and it takes a really quite deep reverse toxic kick out of not doing things and postponing things and delaying things forever till I'm nearly dead. I was hoping you were going to ask me what kind of research I'd done for the role, and I could tell you that, I didn't have to really do much research into the being near death part, because I got that covered. That's my joke for the day. But I'm very interested in procrastination, because I think it's obviously deeply corrosive on a personal level and in our societies, and institutions and societies are formed around our reluctance to do stuff. And I think that he's been right in the middle of an institution which is there for one thing, which is to prevent stuff happening, a big bureaucratic, institution. And then now he has 10 minutes to do something about it, and he gets to do it. And he tries that other thing where you spend all your money and try and get high and try and get laid, and it doesn't. Guess what? It doesn't work. I mean, he just hasn't got it in him. It's not in any way sustaining or refreshing. So and then he meets. There are several. Also, Alex Sharp's part. There are young people, and Sutherland, although slightly older, but still young in terms of Williams. He seeks them out because he's dying and he wishes to be that close to something that's that full of life.
I've been thinking so much about that, like being stagnant, the state of being stagnant, and like I am so bad at making decisions, Bill. Like I was relating to what you were saying. I can stay stuck in something that is not serving me for an exceptionally long time, because the avoidant part of me is quite big. And I think that is what is so amazing about the story, is these are people who, for whatever reason aren't procrastinating, they're just living. And it can be really difficult to do that. Like I was saying before, I thought it was quite poetic. It was like life can get in the way of living, but it's true. Like sometimes you're just stuck.
Amy, did you it sounds like what Bill's saying about you as an actor and you as a person, that there's a quality that you have that kind of helped him in bringing his role to life. What was it like for you to take on the role of Margaret?
Yeah, she's just so, I feel like she's really brave. I think she's a lot more fearless than I am. Because she's very kind and open-hearted, but she also wants stuff for herself, and she speaks her mind, and she's just, I think, and just being, acting with Bill is just the best thing ever. I was like fizzing with joy. So Margaret's supposed to be a joyful person, and honestly, put me in front of Bill and I was like I was just so excited to be there, that I think that, because at first when you read that part, you think, God, that's quite, like, how do you do that without being a Disney princess, like someone who is, do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that actually all the actors, like Alex Sharp, like everyone is so there and with you in the scenes and so present that it's hard to not feel electric, which I think is what she's supposed to feel. Like she's very much got a lot of life in her, but they were just giving me life, basically. The whole everyone involved was giving me that.
Oliver, you mentioned the film of the time period, Japanese cinema, British cinema. But watching this film, it's just, I feel like there's this overwhelming sense of precision to the whole thing. It's just, it feels like every line, every shot, every movement by the actors is just very, purposeful and precise. Can you tell me about your kind of your approach to directing this and some of the things that you were considering based on the script and based on some of the other things that you wanted to include? I
think for me as a process, I'm always trying to, in a way, revolt against what I've done before. And that could be very simple things like changing the aspect ratio of the film that I'm going to shoot, or it's about a challenge of some kind, and I have to have like a narrative challenge, an emotional challenge, and I have to have like a visual challenge. My previous film for me was very personally challenging because I was making a film about an empathy toward white South African men during apartheid, and that was just something that never entered my mind as something that I could tell that story, because not being a white South African man, it felt so foreign to me. And that was that challenge. And with Living, the challenge was I have no real relationship with the concept of death. I'd never really fully spent time thinking about what this would be like for me, and that was the sort of nice and scary kind of in with this process and this project. And then visually, the challenge to create that level of precision was, I decided that I had an obsession with top shots, and I just wanted to see how many top shots I could do in this film, and how I could make that something that I'd always loved as a photographer, and I love graphic things and patterning, and I decided that would be the frightening visual kind of challenge of Living, was to take my eye to London and tell the story. But I think every director is precise. I think the nature of directing is precision. It's choice making constantly, and calibration of things. And so I think every director kind of does that. And in this film, those were my two kind of major challenges.
And what about kind of creating this world of London of the time period? It felt very immersive, and especially that the opening sequence. I wondered, I was like, is this archival footage? It looked like it. What went into that?
I definitely wanted to kind of approach telling the story of London as a setting from a sort of controlled space, in terms of particularly choosing color, and particularly speaking with the director of photography and our costume designer and our production designer, and just limiting things, and knowing that I was also going to do a lot of top shots was also another part of it. But it was, my original mandate to everyone creatively was, how do we make a film in black and white, but that film is in color? And so we have 5 men in an office, and we are incredibly, Sandy Powell, as we all know, is a living genius. Sandy and I spent a lot of time, and she said, I can give you these 5 men each man will have their own color, like they'll have their own shade of gray. And we gave Alex Sharp the color blue, and we gave Bull the darkest of the grays. He was almost in black. And our production designer said, I can give you black walls, and I can give you white paper. And Sandy was like, if you give me white paper, I can put Amy in white shirts, and that in that world, all you'll have is black surfaces and spaces and people in black and white and skin tones, and you'll have your black and white film. And that's kind of what I did with sort of every set. We were like, how do we just, because that's what I love about the original. I think the original film is, an exquisite set of extraordinary images. And that was the major, for me personally, that was the major anxiety, was the original Kurosawa is just so beautiful. So I wanted to make a film in color, but have some kind of reference to a black and white London in a metaphorical way, but also like a physical and literal way.
Yeah, that's
so cool.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, those office.
I know. Wow.
That's
That
what
opening sequence. Oh my God.
It's gorgeous. It's really beautiful. The office scenes as this kind of black and white palette in a color film, that makes sense to me. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, absolutely. But what about kind of on the other end? What about the use of color in this film?
Yeah, Amy's character Margaret is the source of color. She is the source of life, and we as Amy can tell you as well, Sandy wanted her to be in yellow. She wanted her to be in sunshine, because I had just said that I think Margaret is sunshine, and Sandy took that and she ran with that, and she found different ways of giving Margaret warmth, and that was literal color. But then as the story unfolds, we also bring Bill's world, Williams's world, into a lot more color. And then ironically, I said to them at the end, I want to go back to black and white. And so at the end of the film, we return to a monochrome tone and palette.
And is that kind of based on the death that we see?
It's just that, like, the most iconic scene of the original film is something that we had to do, and we had to put Bill on that swing. Yeah. and it's a world of darkness and white snow. So it was the perfect kind of full circle for the world we were creating, was to return to. But the world has changed. In the beginning, the office and that space it's black and white, but it's depressing and it lacks life. But at the end, yet in the same color space, this man is changed, and the world around him is the same, but it feels different.
Can you tell me about the importance of music to the film and kind of how you approach that?
I historically loathed the idea of having music in films. When I was 10 and I was making my first feature film, there's like one piece of music. I just always felt that music was, I don't know, I had this very like naive kind of attitude to what music does in films. And in my last film, I kind of broke through that, and I sort of used really crazy music all over the place. And I kind of liked that very much. And so coming to Living, I did the same thing. I sort of said I would go to the edit every day with just nuts stuff. And I would say to the editors, let's just try this. And even with the song that Bill sings, we also took control of that. We reimagined it and rearranged it before it was taught to Bill to sing. And then we even reimagined it again to have somebody else do it for us at the end of the film. I've really come to like what music can do in movies. I've clearly grown up now, and I definitely wanted the music to just be something that was emotive, but in a way still not taking away from what the actors were doing and what the story was about. And our composer stressed for months because the bar, I think the expectation was high that she had to sort of like deliver, in a sense, a performance. She was seeing these performances and she needed to deliver something equally as successful. And so I think she was definitely stressed.
And Bill, how do you enjoy singing on screen? Because it was very nice.
Well, thank you very much. That was I don't know that I mean, I can do it. I haven't done a great deal of singing professionally. I don't, but yeah, it was one of those things you see on the schedule and you think, oh, do I have to do that on top of everything else? But it was a good day, a good day's work. And it was part of the story with Tom Burke, who I would like to mention, because he was a wonderful part of the film. And it was a great coup that Oliver brought him to the project. And it was a big thing for me to be with him. And he was a big part of that scene. And and the singing of the song, yeah, I can, I do surprise myself. I never think of myself much as a singer, but I did okay. But then the emotional part of it, it's like when you're at a funeral and you're absolutely fine until they ask you to sing, and then they ask you to sing Hey Jude and you fall apart. You're like, and you're just a mess. You get to the second the second line or something and it's over. Well, it was a bit like that, and there was a young extra there, a young woman called Chloe, who I think Oliver strategically placed in the corner of the room, and of course, which is probably sort of self-indulgent, but I looked into her eyes on a few occasions, and then it was over. It was a mess, which helped me a great deal with the emotional part of the scene.
Amy, so many people, of course, know you from Sex Education, wonderful part of the show. You've also done a lot of theater, and I think, is it true this is your first feature role?
I was in another film, but I'm in it for about, if you blink, you're gonna miss me, right? So this was like my first, like, proper, this felt like my first film. No offense to the other one, which is great, which is The Electrical Life of Louis Wayne.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, but I'm like, really, that was kind of like, I could observe a lot on that set because my part was very small, but then this time I felt properly involved. So yeah, it was, and I was like, whoa, like, it was like, I'm in a proper movie here. And when I went to do like the ADR, I said to Oliver after, I was like, I actually couldn't believe it was me. Like, for the first time, that's never happened before. I was looking at it and I was going, this is like a film. What I love about it is it's so, like, Oliver's just amazing because it's so itself and it's completely unique whilst also being such a like classic film. So I think just like watching me in a film with Bill Nighy, I was like, this is mad. And yeah, so it's my first, like, it's my first movie, and it's so different to TV. You actually have time. On Sex Education, it's like, right, that scene that we were going to do in 3 weeks, the really big one, we're doing it now, we've got 30 seconds, and you're like, cool. Whereas within Living, we got to really take our time, and it was just so, you could go so deep with everything, and I think that was just lovely, like, to have time.
And for both you and Bill, wondering, did you I guess what was kind of your relationship like going into shooting? Did you kind of spend some time together to build up a rapport, rehearse? What was that like?
We had lunch, didn't we? We had lunch in a group. Remember that lunch?
Yes, I remember.
Couldn't eat my risotto. I was so nervous.
Yeah, they had lunch, and I could see Amy was so nervous. I sort of looked at her, and she was sort of beside herself that she was sitting with Bill. And I sort of, I don't know if I said it to you. I sort of signaled to you that, like, it was all going to be fine.
Yeah. Because I'd met up with Oliver and then, like, yeah, and then but then lunches on set were so fun, weren't they, Bill? Like, us, and we went for dinners, but yeah. the initial first lunch, my hand was shaking, and I remember everyone going, "You're not hungry, you're not really eating," but it's because I knew if I picked up my fork, I was going to be like, because I was so excited and scared.
And also, it was the COVID thing, wasn't it? Didn't that sort of, that inhibited our contact for a bit before the film?
Yeah.
But we did pretty good, didn't we? I mean, we got on pretty sharpish, pretty good, pretty sharpish.
Pretty sharpish. Yeah. Pretty instant.
We went deep.
So yeah, Bill, it sounds like this was shot during the pandemic. Was this kind of a nice opportunity where the film brought people together and had a chance to make something together?
Yeah, I felt I was very moved by it on more than one occasion, because I'd been, I hadn't done anything for a while, because like everybody else, most other people, and it was my first job back, and it was I was very moved by it, and because of the nature of the film, because of the nature of the people I was working with, because it was deeply satisfactory, and it was a great opportunity. And just to be standing in a stairwell with 30 extras all wearing bowler hats and suits, and people who've known me since I was a kid, and we're all still here, and now we're going to make a film. It was I was very affected by it, and very grateful, to be doing anything, but And then as we went on with the film, it just became apparent that I felt that we were really onto something in every area, and the whole cast we had a magnificent cast.
Thank you all so much. This has been a very wonderful conversation. And, I loved hearing, it seems like you all had such a great time making this film. And yeah, congratulations. Thank you for sharing it with the world, and looking forward to more people seeing it and talking about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Chris.